tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Today, we're starting a new era for parks in the city of Vancouver.
The mayor moves to remove the independently elected park board, citing efficiency.
Make no mistake about it. Abolishing the park board is an erosion of democracy.
But members of his own party call it a power grab. Plus,
we created a program so that they eat healthy and they could cook properly and get physical activity.
Serving up help for thousands of families in need in Surrey. The local Christmas Bureau is very busy. And
I was able to harvest a good amount of eggs, and they produced 2 perfect embryos that became 2 wonderful children.
why are more people choosing to freeze eggs? The challenges and supports for those who want to try to have children later in life.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. It is the only city in British Columbia with a park board. But if Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim gets his way, it will not be unique for much longer. He is vowing to end the more than century-old independently elected park board. But as Justin McElroy explains, that move has divided City Council and his own party.
The Vancouver Park Board. It oversees more than 240 parks, from Stanley to Queen Elizabeth to this little wedge on a hill in the middle of nowhere that doesn't really make any sense. And now it may cease to exist.
Today, we're starting a new era for parks in the city of Vancouver.
That is Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim announcing he will be putting forward a motion to council, asking the province to get rid of the city's independently elected park board. Sim's motion also asked the province to ensure that if control of parks is transferred to mayor and council as requested, no green space can be developed without a unanimous council vote and a public referendum.
This change is about managing these spaces more effectively, not about compromising them.
Almost nowhere else in North America has an independent parks board, and Vancouver's has had its share of controversies in recent years, from the degrading community centers to the degrading Stanley Park train, to the bike lanes, to the 3 years it took to legalize drinking, to the removal of the famed beach logs. So getting rid of the park board may be a political winner. Here's a chart. It appears people support eliminating the park board by a 2-to-1 margin. But there's a couple of potential problems with Sim's plan, because this is what he said a year ago.
What we're going to do is we're going to run a bunch of strong candidates to win a majority on the elected park board. People with incredible lived experiences who have the skills to fix our parks.
After originally promising to get rid of the park board, Sim reversed his position and ran with a team. All 6 of them got elected. And 3 of those park board commissioners aren't really on board with eliminating their oversight.
Make no mistake about it. Abolishing the park board is an erosion of democracy and a centralization of power.
That is Parks Board Commissioner Brendan Bastardyansky. He and 2 other ABC commissioners argued this is a power grab by the mayor. They are now going to sit as independents. And it means ABC no longer has the balance of power on the park board. And the province will have to weigh their request when considering Sim's request.
The city deserves better than to have an important decision like this to be done behind closed doors.
Now, the province could quickly decide to greenlight Sim's request, or they could decide that the current park board deserves to serve out its full term. That decision will come later. In the meantime, Sim will campaign for the park board's elimination, claiming it will create efficiencies and save money, though he was unable to give an exact number on the money today, instead saying this.
No, we can't quantify it today. It's a big organization, but intuitively, look, my background is I'm a lean certified black belt. I understand workflow. I've done it for about 3 decades now.
It was a 30 Rock moment in a Parks and Recreation day, but the point is this. Sim is confident in the policy ideas of getting rid of the park board, and he thinks it's a political winner too. But in the short term, it's created almost as many questions as there are parks in the city. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Surrey Christmas Bureau has opened its doors to help those in need this holiday season. Beyond prepackaged items this year, it's also giving out cooking kits. As Yasmin Gandam shows us, there's more on the push to help people be self-sufficient in the kitchen.
Probably have to do it a couple of times for it.
Boxes filled with gingerbread house-making kits, food condiments, food vouchers, and holiday baking supplies piled up at the Surrey Christmas Bureau, all put together into what they're calling cooking kits. Super Chefs, the organization assembling the kit, says it's important to support healthy eating habits.
We created a program so that they eat healthy and they could cook properly and get physical activity, and that's what we do here in Surrey.
Chang's a Surrey dentist, and he says through his practice, he's seen the dangerous effects of poor nutrition on oral health, and it's something he wants to help change. The kits were decorated by local students and personally autographed by BC Lions players in attendance. The Bureau says over 2,300 families have already registered for the Super Chef kits, the most they have ever seen, and they are struggling to keep up with overall demand.
Everything has gone up in price. Certainly groceries have skyrocketed in price, and families are really feeling that, and it's just weighing on them that how are they going to provide those wonderful Christmas meals.
So there's an ever-increasing need for not just food, but toys and financial donations from the community. This year's Super Chefs is also putting on a decorating contest aimed to get people to show off their kitchen skills.
We've allowed them to share their pictures so we can see what they've cooked, and this year is a contest for whoever gives us the best pictures and images. We're going to invite them to our Super Chef summer camp so that they can experience it in full.
City officials were also in attendance, speaking to the importance of donations, especially during a time of rapid inflation.
This is huge for the city of Surrey. So many families here go without so much at Christmas, and what Dr. Greg is doing and the Christmas Bureau is just amazing. It allows every family in Surrey to have a happy Christmas and to do things together, to bake together, and to just do the things that families like to do during the holiday season.
The Bureau says no matter what, people will never see empty shelves, and they will do what they can to ensure every family has a happy holiday. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Surrey.
Next week marks Surrey Police Chief Norm Lipinski's third year on the job. He says he's looking forward to a year of growth for his force in 2024 as he looks back on a tumultuous journey, to say the least, so far.
I'm proud of the people that we hired because we go through some tough times, and remember, as a chief or as senior leaders, we not only run an organization of 400 employees, but we got to continue to build it. And so it's a bit of a dual role, and it takes a lot of time and work and effort. And then we have to work with stakeholders to make it all work.
Chief Lipinski says the Surrey Police Service has hired about 340 officers so far. He says he hopes to complete the municipal police transition in 2 years, though the city has gone to court to stop it. BC's chief coroner, for years one of the main voices and faces in BC's toxic drug crisis, has announced she's retiring. In a written statement, Lisa Lapointe says she will be leaving her role in February after 13 years and 3 terms. It will also mark her 30th year of service as a member of the BC Public Service. Looking back on her tenure, Lapointe highlighted the ongoing poison drug crisis that has killed tens of thousands of people in this province alone. Lapointe writes, "It deeply saddens me that we've been unable to influence the essential change necessary to reduce the tragic impacts of toxic drugs on so many. The measures recommended by the expert members of the Coroner's Service Death Review Panel are essential to ending this crisis, and I will continue to support those." The Watershed Watch Salmon Society is sounding the alarm after Fisheries and Oceans Canada data revealed a spike in wild fish killed in salmon farms. That data shows 817,000 wild fish were reported killed in open net pen salmon farm operations in 2022, almost 5 times the number killed the year before. Nearly all of those fish are herring, which one expert says are foundational to BC's marine food web.
The big concern is this problem is getting significantly worse. We're seeing unprecedented levels of wild fish caught and killed by the salmon farming industry, and that's a great concern.
DFO documents show that most of the fish that were accidentally killed by a hydrolysing vessel, a machine that removes sea lice from farmed salmon.
The time to step up and protect the species is now. We really don't have time to not take any action.
The BC government has promised to remove open net salmon farms from the ocean by 2025, but details that were supposed to be announced this past summer have yet to be shared. You might have heard of the term egg freezing, a chance for people to try to have children later in life. Now data shows more people are choosing to freeze their eggs. Benita Breach explores how it works, its challenges, and the growing support offered to those hoping to start a family one day.
These tanks are topped up with liquid nitrogen. They're checked every day.
Inside these barrels, there's hundreds of human eggs that might be born as babies one day.
We refer to it as like the shell of the egg. Yeah.
And just how long can these eggs stay frozen here?
As long as you want to keep them frozen for. So they're stored in a glass-like state, liquid nitrogen minus 196 degrees Celsius.
Egg freezing basically involves harvesting eggs from ovaries, freezing them, and using them later in life.
For some, egg freezing is the way to try and beat their biological clock. But how does it happen? How successful is it, and at what cost?
We asked the medical experts, people who've done this, employers, and the province of BC to find out more. Here at Olive Fertility Clinic in Vancouver, it all starts with a consultation and education.
What's the likelihood or the viability of them to get a reasonable number of eggs?
Then treatment begins with hormonal priming.
It's really a month of hormonal prep with pills, either birth control or estrogen pills.
Next is stimulation.
We do injectable hormones. Women are doing them at home in the morning and at night for anywhere between 8 to 12 days.
And the eggs are monitored as they grow.
We count the number of eggs we see on ultrasound, we measure them, and based upon the size and the distribution of all the egg growth, we determine then when is the right time to do an egg extraction.
After the eggs are taken out, they're frozen at this lab. Now, that's all one retrieval, also known as a cycle, and some might require multiple cycles to get enough eggs.
Now, egg freezing doesn't always promise a baby. It largely depends on the age and the quantity and quality of eggs. But over the last decade, statistics show the amount of people choosing to freeze their eggs has grown significantly.
According to the nonprofit Canadian Fertility and Andrology Society, in 2013 there were nearly 100 cycles. Their data shows almost a decade later it grew to more than 1,500 cycles. And this includes new patients and people returning to do more cycles. But why? One psychosocial researcher says the recent jump could be because people were most isolated during the pandemic and dating less. But this also meant that they had more time to figure out what really mattered to them. And
there are a lot of misconceptions that egg freezer are mainly women interest in career building. So egg freezing is a way that they can sort of spend more time at work and then have kids later. But we now have very strong research data to show that this is not the case. In fact, a lot of women interested in egg freezing mainly because they are single. They don't have a committed partner to build a family together.
Pictures.
This mom can relate to that.
That's the embryo that became Aryeh.
Natalie was 37 when she froze her eggs.
It's kind of late in the game, but I got lucky and I was able to harvest a good amount of eggs, and they produced 2 perfect embryos that became 2 wonderful children. Okay, well, I'm making some pasta for dinner. The turning point was turning 40 and just not finding my partner in life, and really just wanting to proceed with having a family and feeling like it was time. My intention was to be a single mom.
For others, egg freezing is more of a safety net.
I actually don't know if I want to have kids in the future, but I also don't want to not have that opportunity in the future. That kind of thing.
Kelsey is 32. She's a nurse at Olive Clinic and just froze her eggs this year.
I actually found that I had a little bit more of a diminished ovarian reserve than I had thought for somebody that is my age. So that was a little bit surprising for me. I feel like with egg freezing, it kind of gives women the ability to sort of take back some of that autonomy, and you kind of have more control over your future.
But getting that control can be an uphill battle. One of the biggest barriers is the cost.
There's a huge financial commitment that each egg freezing cycle is roughly about $12,000 to $15,000, and it's a very expensive process.
Costs can also depend on the clinic, how many cycles a patient needs, medications to extra lab work. For Natalie's 2 kids,
we are able to at least test fertility and get that paid for with the government, which I think is something that's a good start. But the whole process, I believe, cost about $40,000. Do they have to scream?
In Canada, the cost to freeze your eggs might be partly covered, depending on where you live and the procedure you're getting. Alberta, Saskatchewan, and the Northwest Territories are among the places that don't cover elective egg freezing, according to their governments. Here in BC, the Ministry of Health says it covers many costs related to fertility assessments, but it doesn't cover egg freezing.
Beyond the financial stress, experts say people can often face psychological challenges.
If their body don't respond well, that they have to take more fertility drugs, and ends up that they don't have the expected numbers of frozen eggs at the end.
She says that can lead to depression and anxiety, especially for people who have had mental health challenges in the past. She also says doing the process alone, as many people do, is emotionally taxing.
I felt vulnerable. For my first kid, the whole thing was like just walking on eggshells. I didn't experience a lot of side effects, and the experience did happen very seamlessly. And I know that not everyone has that experience, so I really want to be sensitive to that.
Nothing's really guaranteed, right?
Why not? Biggest challenge is we need young eggs, and a lot of them.
In many cases, Dr. Talon says the older you get, the quality and quantity of eggs goes down too, making it more challenging to have a baby.
Less than 35, you get 10 eggs. The projected live birth rate is 60%, so it's not a guarantee. If you're 38 to 40, and the average age of our patients coming in are already 38 years when they're looking to freeze their eggs, if they were to get 10 eggs, it's a 40% probability of a live birth.
So yes, it's a lot of money, and the chances of having a baby might be low, but still, some are willing to take big risks, even just for a chance.
I see women choosing to change their careers. They're looking for companies with extended benefits that help cover either medication costs or potentially the entire treatment cycle.
Here in BC, the University of British Columbia began new fertility benefits this spring, including $40,000 of lifetime coverage for lab services, egg freezing to IVF.
Why was it so important to do this here?
Because it's 2023. Because the university is very interested in advancing the principles of equity and inclusion across our campuses, because we heard from our community members that this was a service that they needed, and we felt that they deserve it.
Here, about 16,000 faculty and staff are covered. And here are some other companies in Canada that offer egg freezing coverage. They're mostly bigger companies such as banks, tech companies, and retailers. But a study commissioned by Organon Canada found of almost 1,000 Canadian employers, most, 53%, do not offer fertility benefits for employees.
So what we found is the majority aren't offering any benefits, but this is a big increase from where we were 2 years ago. The vast majority are only covering the cost of our drugs. Right? So while that's helpful, we need employers to be offering more inclusive benefits that cover your cost of drugs plus treatment costs, because when we don't cover those treatment costs, we're still leaving people with huge financial costs.
She says while it can be challenging, it's important to have conversations about fertility between employers and employees.
I can't tell you the amount of people I've talked to who have taken a second job at Starbucks. So people are working 2 jobs just to pay for their fertility treatment by working with companies that offer these amazing benefits.
So benefits can help, but support can also come in other ways.
We need to ask, how come a lot of women feel that they cannot have children earlier? Okay, and we need to have more open discussions about social policy, how to support women having children earlier.
Yi says there also needs to be more support for single women who want to have children on their own.
So that they don't think of egg freezing as just as a sort of a get it done as a backup plan. They're always proactive in having children, always proactive in thinking about the childbearing plan, about the family building plan, so that, they don't even have to do egg freezing, and they feel, they can have children whenever they want to have.
Now, egg freezing can work. It can give hope or be a big question mark with no promises. Really, I guess it's asking what you want and what you're willing to go through to have a child. Benit Brach, CBC News, Vancouver.
Meteorologist Russ Licade is in for Darius tonight, who's on assignment. Join us a little later. And we're dealing with a calmish,
It's going
Before
to be
the
a little
stormish?
calm. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, calm for a couple of days, Dan. We're teasing up the idea of a storm to begin the weekend, but, you know, my track record is sketchy, so maybe it won't be stormy on Saturday. We'll see how things turn out, right? Just currently, your satellite analysis here to give you an idea. The main mother low is still in the Gulf of Alaska. The torrent of rain from the Pineapple Express has been completely steered off now towards the southeast part of the province, where weather warnings remain in effect. We'll touch upon those a little bit later. Some mixed rain and snow and some heavy rain in the southeast corner of the province. But things are relatively calm through the central part of the province. We have a trough of low pressure, which is sort of merging with a couple of weaker lows. And I have to be honest, I don't know which one of those is going to take over. One of them will. And so we've rolled them through a computer model forecast to see what it might look like over the next couple of days. And that model forecast is bringing rain showers in here tomorrow, but it's not stormy, just a few showers. Here's our brighter day. It's going to be Friday with a window for a couple of sunny breaks in there. A cool, pleasant, dry Friday with some sunny breaks to begin the weekend. That's a big rainstorm, strong winds on the coast, snow inland, and right where the two meet in the middle, yeah, it's a close call. It'll be thick rain, cold rain, maybe we'll call it that, but it's certainly going to be on the chilly side. Today wasn't that chilly. We got to 9 degrees for a high across the region. That's comfortable for this time of year. Overnight tonight, dropping down to maybe 4 or 5 degrees, give or take. There's a couple of showers in the forecast again tomorrow, but I think tonight is relatively dry. And your storm details, Dan, those are about 20 minutes away.
Sounds good. Thanks, Russ.
You bet.
Gingerbread, latkes, Christmas turkey. The holidays are approaching, and ahead of the Yuletide spreads, our Darius Madavi will explain how our brains and our stomachs know when to put down the fork. That's next. Thanks for joining our commercial-free live stream tonight. It was a loud and long send-off for a champion last night. Burnaby-born superstar Christine Sinclair played her final international soccer match at home. Liam Britton has more on the legend's goodbye in front of almost 50,000 fans.
Passing the torch. Christine Sinclair finished her time as Canada's women's soccer leader to deafening cheers. Inside the stadium renamed for her for one game. Hours before kickoff, fans were loud. And they stayed loud all night long for the GOAT. At her final game for Canada, Sinclair's soccer greatness was on display. Olympic gold, a CONCACAF title, the all-time international goal scorer for women and men, feted in a pre-game tribute.
We thank you for what you've done. You are truly a national treasure.
That prompted a few tears. When she went on the attack, elation.
Sinclair gets a touch to it. Buchanan in the back post off the bar and knocked in by Quinn.
Her teammates scored the game's only goal. After 57 minutes, she took her final bow, subbed in by close friend, teammate, and fellow British Columbian Sophie Schmidt, another national team stalwart playing in her last international game.
The final whistle goes on her night.
And when the final whistle blew victory, it was joy and thanks from tens of thousands of fans in the stands and beyond.
Well, she's such a great inspiration for young girls and young women.
It's almost sad, but at the same time, like, a happy feeling to know that, like, she's done so much and that she deserves to all the people that are here for her. She's just an amazing role model and she has amazing leadership.
A golden memory for a legend in red and white. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
The holidays are a time to gather with loved ones normally, and often it's done around a table. While this season can be a time to indulge, new research shows us how your body keeps track of how much you're eating. To explain how our brains, tongues, and stomachs team up on this, science and climate specialist Darius Madavi joins us now. Darius, how do our bodies know when to put down the fork?
The best way to describe it is as an epic tug of war between the part of your brain that says, oh, this is really yummy, I should keep eating, and the part that says, all right, maybe we should slow down. Now, for a long time, the best evidence was that your tongue was on one side of this epic war, saying this is yummy, and your stomach is on the other, saying I'm getting full. But according to new research, that's not the whole picture. Now, take a look at this graphic. This is a cross-section of your brain, and you can see here there would actually be various parts of your brain that are involved in determining how hungry you are, controlling how much you're eating, but here are two important ones. The first is the hypothalamus. This is the part of your brain flashing green that says eat more. When something yummy touches your tongue, it says, I really like this, we should keep eating it. But there's another part of your brain down here in the brain stem, which actually makes it very hard to study, but it says eat less. It's when you start feeling full, you think, all right, this doesn't taste as good anymore. And you'll notice that as soon as food enters the mouth, as soon as it touches the tongue, it signals to both of those parts of your brain. It says both eat more and all right, this is maybe pretty calorie heavy. Maybe this is mashed potatoes or potato chips. Maybe we should slow down a little bit. It doesn't necessarily say stop, but it says, all right, let's pace ourselves. And this is what this new research showed that was really groundbreaking, because before we thought this was just the gut, just the role of the gut. Now the gut is also involved. As the food continues to make its way into the mouth, you'll notice both the green and yellow part of the brain still signaling, both saying we should eat more and let's pace ourselves and just sort of have that balancing act between the two. But as soon as the stomach gets involved, there we go, we're flashing orange now. It's saying, all right, let's have an extra signal, say, all right, I'm getting a little bit full. And then once it's really full, it says, all right, I'm done now, we should stop. And you'll notice as soon as the food stops entering the mouth, stops touching the tongue, that green part of the brain stops signaling. It stops saying, let's keep putting food in. And instead we say, all right, we're coming to a stop now, we're good. And at least until that food leaves the stomach and enters the rest of your digestive system, you're pretty much done then. And the food just won't taste as good. Because if you're just shoveling food into your mouth, it doesn't, very quickly you start to lack that, miss that taste. It doesn't taste quite as good. And so that's what this new research showed. It's not just your gut doing it, it's your tongue too. And immediately, as soon as you start eating too quickly, it says, all right, let's calm down here.
Now, most of us have a guilty pleasure when it comes to eating, especially around the holidays. Does this help explain that?
Yes, and what's yours, Dan?
Cheese spread.
Oh, good choice. Mac and cheese for me. There we go. Let's have a cheese party. Now, it's all about that balance between the eat more and eat less parts of your brain, this tug of war. For foods you really love, that balance can be hard to strike, and you end up in a bit of a vicious cycle.
You can be standing at a cocktail party and there's a bowl of peanuts and you're just looking at it for an hour, not hungry, right? You don't touch it, just having a conversation. But then you take one peanut and all of a sudden you're just shoveling peanuts into your mouth every 5 seconds, right? And it's because that sensory experience of the taste acts as positive feedback that propels you forward to continue eating it, even if you're not hungry.
So if there's a food you really love, that really triggers the eat more part of your brain. And it can take a long time for your body to catch up and realize it needs to stop. Like when you open a bag of chips and what feels like 5 seconds later, the bag is empty, or you finish making dinner and it's mac and cheese and then you've eaten the whole tray, which may or may not be a true story.
Science and climate specialist Darius Madavi. Thanks for the true story.
Thanks, Dan.
A working holiday for Parliament Hill, why the Conservatives are promising thousands of amendments to keep MPs sitting. That's next.
This bus can hold 72 people. On some of its runs, it has 70 students.
This is probably the first year I've had that many students, and it's definitely a change.
He's not the only one. Rob Harding says about a handful are around the 72-person limit. Some are even over. He says more and more students register for transportation during the year, meaning drivers are having to work together or sometimes make multiple trips.
There's days where we're leaving kids behind, and our supervisors are getting buses to come and pick the students that were left behind, or that bus driver will drop the students off at the school and swing back and pick them up.
The public schools branch says at the start of the year, routes can sometimes have more than 72 riders. But student enrollment, routes, and fleet size are looked at regularly. It should be ironed out by now, and says it's not aware of any routes with too many students. Harding says the problem is mainly in the Charlottetown area. PEI's population is growing. They need more drivers, and he says the number of buses isn't keeping up.
We'd like to see more buses, whether it's new fossil fuel buses, or new electric buses, and more drivers, more positions available. Because right now, it's not working to the best of what it should be.
The PSB operates 261 buses that handle about 750 runs a day. Those are spread over multiple schools with different dismissal times. There are no plans to adjust that right now. In a statement to CBC News, the PSB said periodically the PSB's transportation department hears from parents, guardians, staff, or students about the utilized space on its buses. Each inquiry is addressed individually, and the appropriate action is taken when needed. All buses used by the PSB have manufacturer-recommended capacities, which are never exceeded. Back at school, drivers like Harding are getting ready to take everyone home. And while it may be a tight squeeze for some today, the union hopes that's not the case for much longer. Cheyenne Desjardins, CBC News, Stratford.
The Bank of Canada is standing pat on its trend-setting interest rate, holding it at 5%. It's the third time in a row the bank has held the rate steady. It says there is encouraging evidence that higher rates are restraining spending and helping bring down inflation. Canada's economic growth has slowed considerably over the past year, and inflation is now running at 3.1%. The bank says it is willing, though, to continue rate hikes if inflation moves up again. Analysts widely expect it will start lowering rates as early as the spring. Farmers in Canada are expressing their disappointment after a private member's bill was changed that would suspend the carbon tax for their operations. Kate McKenna shows us the latest political fight that has the opposition making threats.
Before they're loaded into trucks like this, some grains need to be dried. And farmers say the carbon tax on the fuel that heats this silo is driving up the cost of food.
Generally, when I talk to other farmers, they do the same thing that I do. Basically, you can't sell your product for what you used to be able to sell it for.
He says he pays up to $25,000 a year in carbon tax, and he hoped a Conservative private member's bill would pass and give him a break. It would remove the carbon tax on the fuel used to dry grain and exempt it on fuel for heating barns and greenhouses. But it's hit a snag.
The Honourable Senator Bussin.
The Senate voted to amend the bill, delaying it from passing and putting its future in jeopardy.
I've already heard from dozens of farmers already sharing deep disappointment.
This bill found itself in the spotlight and senators under pressure. It was a target for Conservatives who've made abolishing the carbon tax their signature policy.
We are announcing a 3-year pause.
After the Liberals suspended the tax on home heating oil, the Prime Minister vowed no more exemptions.
There will absolutely not be any other carve-outs or suspensions of the price on pollution.
That pledge created pressure on the government to kill the bill.
So there clearly has been some politicking in the Senate, clearly has been some lobbying. It's unfortunate to see.
Now that politicking has intensified.
Well, I've got news for Justin Trudeau. You've ruined Christmas for Canadians. Common sense Conservatives are going to ruin your vacation as well.
Pierre Poilievre says his party will use every tool to force Parliament to sit through the holidays unless more carbon tax exemptions are made.
He can, make us work late. We're happy to do it.
The Conservatives plan to force a 24-hour voting marathon in the House of Commons starting Thursday. They say it's just the beginning of what will be a procedural brawl. One thing is clear, the political fight over carbon pricing is far from over. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
The flags in front of École Polytechnique in Montreal are flying at half staff now as that school pays tribute to the victims of the 1989 massacre. On this day, 34 years ago, 14 young women were murdered in a mass shooting targeting women on campus. 13 other people were injured. It was Canada's deadliest mass shooting at the time. School representatives and student associations wore white ribbons today and laid wreaths on the memorial plaque at the school. They also marked a moment of silence. Blue Jays fans are holding their collective breath as news of baseball phenom Shohei Ohtani's signing remains up in the air. More on the likelihood of him playing in Toronto after the break.
Neil Campbell has been doing a lot of this all fall, testing corn and other crops brought here to the PEI grain elevators to make sure they are dry enough to ship to market. It has been a wet harvest, and that has meant some added expense.
It means farmers and ourselves have to burn more propane to dry down our products. Certainly we've used our dryers a lot more this year than we certainly did the year before. Bottom line, propane's expensive, it costs, and it ties up manpower. You have to run longer hours, and it takes money out of people's pockets.
That's not the only problem. There's also a shortage of trucks and truck drivers.
We have a lot of fall crops that have to be harvested, everything from carrots to corn and potatoes and high moisture corn. There's lots of demand for trucks the last 2 months for sure.
Campbell says all 3 grain elevators on the island are full right now, so they also need to keep shipments moving to free up space for the rest of the harvest. Here in Elmwood, Alan Miller is relieved that his 2023 harvest is over.
November, I think, was a real scary month, but I ended up being quite happy that I did get my soybeans harvested. I've never harvested soybeans in November before in my life.
Alan Miller says he was late planting his soybeans this season because he was busy cleaning up damage in the fields from post-tropical storm Fiona. Then the weather in August put a damper on what was looking like an outstanding crop.
In July, I was looking at my soybeans saying, wow, this is going to be a record crop. And then things just started slowly unraveling.
In a statement to CBC News, the PEI Agricultural Insurance Corporation says there was an increase in grain claims this year over previous years, largely in part due to weather-related events that led to excessive moisture.
The overall description was a pretty bad year. There was one in 2010. So, this is the worst one since then. So hopefully next year, maybe the Leafs will win a cup and I'll have a record crop.
Back at the grain elevator, Neil Campbell expects a busy month ahead. He says they would usually wrap up around December 10th, but this year he expects they won't finish drying soybeans until late in December. Nancy Russell, CBC News, Kensington.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for making CBC British Columbia's Food Bank Day a huge success.
We kicked off the holiday season with a day of special programming, festive performances, and a whole lot of generosity from you.
So far, we have raised an incredible amount for food banks across BC, and you can still donate all month long. Let's make the season kind for people in need. Head to cbc.ca/foodbankday. A lot of Blue Jays fans are nervously excited right now. Baseball's biggest superstar could be coming to Toronto. Thomas Dagler reports on the anticipation and speculation.
Nothing could get baseball fans amped up in December like rampant rumors about the hottest player on the planet making his way here. Maybe.
Please come to Toronto. They'll be great.
I think this is one of the perfect city for him.
Japanese free agent phenom Shohei Ohtani is in serious talks to leave the Los Angeles Angels after 6 seasons. The reigning American League MVP at age 29, he's an ultra-rare ace pitcher and super slugger.
He's doing both, and he is excelling at both. We have quite simply never seen that before.
This past season, Ohtani hit more home runs than anyone else in the league. Now, sports media are devoting hours of coverage to speculate about where Ohtani will land.
I want you guys to look at the pie chart, the likelihood of the teams where he will go.
The Blue Jays are considered one of his most likely picks, but the club's management is keeping quiet.
Any deal to pull off that is of some significance is exceptionally complex.
Ohtani went to the same high school in Japan as Jays pitcher Yusei Kikuchi. He's also said to have enjoyed his previous stops in Toronto, like this one last year. But there's more.
Obviously, Ohtani would be playing here at the Rogers Centre. In your mind, what might attract him to Toronto and to Canada?
It doesn't quite have the same baseball media focus that like a New York or a Boston might have. Ohtani has always preferred to avoid distractions and maintain his privacy as much as possible.
Recent surgery is likely to keep Ohtani from pitching next season. Still, he's looking for a major payday, and Jays owner Rogers has deep pockets.
Ohtani himself has said nothing publicly about any of this. Whenever he does sign a contract, it's expected to be the biggest ever in North American sports, worth more than $500 million US. Thomas Dagler, CBC News, Toronto.
Meteorologist Russ Lacade is back with the full BC forecast, and we called it calmish last time.
Yeah, I think calm applies. Okay. Absolutely no significant wind coming tonight. Probably a few showers sneaking in again. No big wind really through the end of the week, but that leaves the other 5 days of the 7-day forecast. So we'll I guess we'll touch upon those in time as well. Dan, our satellite analysis shows us the main mother low in the Gulf of Alaska. It's pivoting this trough towards the coastline. So we did dry out in a number of areas around Vancouver Island today, parts of the Sunshine Coast as well. But ultimately, those two lows, these two weaker ones, they pivot towards the coastline. This one dives farther to the south and begins to sort of narrow out what is left of that trough line. So I don't know that it has a great impact when it makes it to the coast. Where we have more impactful weather right now is what's left of that Pineapple Express, and it is over parts of the southeast corner of the province. We've got a couple of weather warnings still in effect right now, and they're primarily for areas around the southeast corner of the province. So the rainfall warning is still up for the Elk Valley. The rainfall warning for Highway 3 has changed to a snowfall warning. So the precipitation changing phases in the middle of the night might be up to 15 centimeters for parts of Highway 3, also 15 to 20 in Banff. In the wake of all that precipitation, high humidity, stagnant air masses, and near zero visibility, we have some fog advisories up for the Kinbasket, the Similkameen as well, parts of the North Columbia. So let's have a look at the forecast for your destinations around the province tomorrow. Looking at some mixed rain and snow showers in Terrace and in Bella Coola. Regular old rain showers across Vancouver Island. A drier but fairly cloudy day over the South Thompson and into the Okanagan. We'll add a little more sunshine as you move farther north through the province. North of the central interior and towards the Peace, the northeast corner of the province, sunny and chilly. That's not a bad idea. Now, I want to touch upon that model forecast, the computer model forecast, turning our focus to what's happening in the lower mainland. A relatively calm day tomorrow, but yeah, there's going to be a couple of showers in there for sure. Friday is the day with a little bit of sun mixed in. You're considered a public service announcement here that for Saturday, that's a big storm coming. It's rain for Metro Vancouver. It's wind along the exposed coast. If you have plans to go to the island for the weekend, try to dip out on Friday because ferries may get delayed with that wind Saturday. If you're going to Whistler for the weekend, I think the Sea to Sky Highway will be a mess with wet snow, so consider getting out of town on Friday if you can. Long-range picture, Dan, it's cool, dry, and some sun mixed in for next week.
Very good safety tips. Thank you, Russ.
You bet.
It's a nonprofit that aims to empower women who have arrived in Canada with the tools to create their own businesses. In this new Creator Network film, we're going to meet the people behind Flavors of Hope and introduce you to some of the creative cooks who've whipped up some thriving businesses.
I really want to shift the dominant stories often we hear of refugee women, of women who are always in need or women need help from other people that they don't have as much power. I want to see women be leaders in our community. I want them to be proud of who they are and where they come from through food. At Flavors of Hope, we offer a newcomer women food business program called Dream Cuisines. Our vision is to see newcomer women coming to Canada flourish and experience belonging in our community through cooking, storytelling, community building, and food entrepreneurship. Throughout 3 years of running Dream Cuisines.
Apologies, we're having some technical trouble with that story. We'll try and get it to you in a little bit after this. He was a top act of the late 60s and early 70s right here in Vancouver. But Jason Hoover's music has faded from memory. Until now, how a CBC Song Contest brought out one of his songs right back into the spotlight. That's next.
The world's best figure skaters are in China this week for the Grand Prix final, and a whopping 5 of the entries are Canadian. Here are the names you need to know ahead of the event. Let's begin with ice dance, where 3 of the 6 teams are from Canada. Following victories at Skate Canada and the Cup of China, Piper Gillis and Paul Poirier will look to defend their Grand Prix title beginning on Friday in Beijing. Now, no one's put up a better total score this season than the 219 points they posted at Skate Canada. Laurence Fournier-Beaudry and Nikolai Sorensen, they're back at the Grand Prix final after a couple of silver medal performances. Meanwhile, Marjorie Lajoie and Zachary Laga have qualified for their first final after being the first alternates last season. All 3 teams will be keeping a very close eye on Madison Chalk and Evan Bates of the United States. They're the defending world champions. Now, in the pairs event, which starts on Thursday, 2 of the 6 entries are Canadian. Diana Stoleta-Dudek and Maxime Deschamps took their skating to a new level this season. They won Skate Canada and the Cup of China. And along the way, they broke the 200-point barrier for the first time. Consider them the gold medal favorites. They're joined by the rising Canadian pair of Leah Pereira and Trent Michaud. In their first Grand Prix season together, they earned silver at Skate America before winning the Grand Prix of France. While there won't be any Canadians in the men's or women's competitions in Beijing, there are still plenty of reasons to watch. On the men's side, it truly feels like things are wide open, but Adam Xiao-Him-Fa is the only man to have won 2 events this season. The French skater and Ilya Malinin of the United States both broke the 300-point barrier this year. However, you cannot count out the 2-time world champion Shoma Uno and the reigning Olympic silver medalist Yuma Kajiyama, both from Japan. Things aren't nearly as wide open, though, in the women's event. Everyone's going to be chasing Japan's Kaori Sakamoto. The 2-time world champion won both of her events by at least 15 points this season. If Belgium's Luna Hendricks skates like she did at Skate America, she could give Sakamoto a run for her money. Now, you'll be able to stream every performance for the Grand Prix final on cbcsports.ca and CBC Gem. Things get underway with the pair's short program at 4:55 a.m. Eastern on Thursday. Go to our website for the full streaming schedule.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
For 37 years, British Columbians have been donating to food banks at CBC British Columbia's Food Bank Day, raising more than $18 million for food banks in BC. December 1st kicked off the annual charity drive and continues to the end of the month. We thank you for generously donating and supporting local communities in our province. Make the season kind and donate until December 31st at cbc.ca/foodbankday.
Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson is back in the spotlight and the hot seat. He's facing questions from an inquiry into his government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. And Johnson began by offering his apologies. Abby Kuwathasan has more.
You're going to apologise to the bereaved families, Mr. Johnson?
Former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been answering questions inside this government building. Outside, certainly plenty of reporters, but also families of those who died during the COVID-19 pandemic. They've hung up photos of their loved ones. Some are holding signs. One reads, "Nature's way of dealing with old people," something Johnson is reported to have said during the pandemic when he was the Prime Minister. There's also another large sign that reads, "Let the bodies pile high." An ex-advisor to Johnson claims that the Prime Minister at the time uttered those very words. Now, this is very much an inquiry about finding out whether the Johnson government was functioning properly during the pandemic.
I understand the feelings of these victims and their families, and I am deeply sorry for the pain and the loss and the suffering of those victims.
He acknowledges that mistakes were made, but insists that his government did its very best. Some would certainly argue that, given the lockdown parties that were held at number 10 Downing when he was the Prime Minister, some parties that he himself attended.
I just want answers. I want to know why this has happened, why he didn't learn from the mistakes of the first wave, why he didn't lock down sooner, and why my mum died when she didn't need to.
Those parties eventually led to his resignation. But again, this inquiry about looking at whether the Johnson government handled the pandemic and how it handled it. A pandemic that saw more than 232,000 people die, one of the highest figures in all of Europe. Abby Kuwathasan, CBC News, London.
Israel is widening its ground and air offensive against Hamas in southern Gaza, and new evacuation orders have been issued by the Israeli military. The UN warns that the renewed fighting has worsened conditions since the temporary truce ended by preventing the distribution of much-needed humanitarian aid. The CBC's Evan Dyer has more.
About 80% of Gaza's people have already had to leave their homes, many leaving Gaza City in the north for the relative safety of the territory's second largest city, Khan Yunis, in the south. But the bombs have followed them, and today more civilians died in Khan Yunis. Israeli forces ordered people to move even further south, all the way to Rafah, where Palestinians can look across into Egypt. This is as far as we can go, says this refugee, and if they want to displace us, they can kill us right here. We won't go any further. Even in Rafah, there is no respite from the bombing. 18 were reported killed in this building. The UN said it had seen no recalibration of Israel's approach, despite U.S. pressure to change tactics that have caused Gaza's cemeteries to overflow with dead.
Palestinians in Gaza are living in utter, deepening horror. Military operations, including bombardments by Israeli forces, continue in North, Middle, and South Gaza, affecting people who have already been displaced multiple times, forced to flee in search of safety. But no place is safe.
In Washington, frustration with the Israeli government led to a rare sanction against Israeli settlers yesterday, a visa ban on some settler extremists. The White House has repeatedly told Israel to rein in settlers who have rampaged through the West Bank, but Jewish settlers who kill and displace Palestinian civilians rarely face punishment, and they've only stepped up attacks since October 7th. Today, Israel's National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, himself a settler, complained that punishing Jews would confuse the enemy with the beloved. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Ottawa.
Our colleagues at the CBC Radio's The Early Edition are running a fun competition these days. It's inspired by a UK contest that has artists compete to be #1 on the charts on Christmas Day. Suggestions are taken from listeners and viewers and readers, and the melodies not need be Christmas related. Easy for me to say. There have been some interesting suggestions, including a melody from a Vancouver singer who was once a rising star. Here's Jason Hoover in December 1968 on a CBC TV show called Where It's At.
Jason, how's your record doing across Canada?
Well, it's been out here locally about a week, and it's getting across Canada, I hope.
I should hope so. And incidentally, Toronto and Montreal, watch out because...
we are coming.
That's right. Watch out for their big... You got a big purple bus, a fantastic bus, so you can't miss them when they come into your town. And I'd like to hear King Size, and I'm sure everybody would.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right.
When the sun goes down, let's sing it. Ah, yeah. I need you. All my soul is gone. All right, let's sing it, baby. Come on, get it one time, man. Gotcha. Give it to me. King size.
That was part of King Size, performed by Jason Hoover and his band, The Epics, back in 1968, right here on CBC Television, with host the great Fred Latrimo. A listener suggested that song to the Early Edition. Jason Hoover sadly died just last month at the age of 78, but a documentary about his life is now in the works. Filmmaker David Love Jones joined Stephen Quinn on the radio to talk about Hoover and his legacy. Stephen asked him if he's surprised the song made it on the list.
I'm not surprised because we had a memorial at my shop, Vinyl Records, for Jason the same day as his funeral. He died on November 5th. At the memorial, all of the family was there down at Vinyl Records on Water Street. And it was quite moving. In fact, Kentish Steele, another local singer, sang King Size. And a lot of the family identify with that song. That's Jason's signature song. And it was his first song. And the week it came out, incredibly, he opened for Led Zeppelin, who were then unknown because their album hadn't quite come out. This is 1968.
Oh, my gosh. Tell us more about Jason. I mean, who was he?
Well, he's a soul singer who came here from Edmonton, and he showed up here in 1964. And within over a year, he had convinced CBC's Let's Go TV show for him to sing some cover songs of Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, and the Four Tops. So he was on nationally broadcast television by 1966. And then after that first band he was in, called the Epics, which was the top local R&B soul group, he formed the Trials of Jason Hoover in 68, and that was their debut single. But interestingly, it's actually more like the Epics than it is his next band, the Trials of Jason Hoover, which became more Sly and Family Stone and more psychedelic. But that first single, the gritty raw soul that we heard, was very much the Epics playing it, in fact, and recorded by the Epics. And that was the debut single for the Trials, just because, I guess in a way that was convenient because he'd broken up the Epics. But what it captures is the raw sound of R&B in the 60s and what it was really like here. And I would say it's arguably the greatest soul single that's ever come out locally.
So cool. Finally, still with music, Swifties have another big reason to celebrate, as if there weren't enough. Taylor Swift has been named Time Magazine's Person of the Year for 2023. It's been a complete love story for her this year, and the U.S. superstar's influence has reached new heights. Her Eras concert tour is on track to become the highest-grossing tour of all time. She's also put out a concert movie with AMC that gave the theater chain its highest single-day ticket sales in history, don't you know? And Swift has released 2 more albums in her latest songbook this year as well, Speak Now and 1989, both Taylor's version. Well done. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube, and of course our website, cbc.ca/BC. I will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. We'll see you then.